Away we go. Take it away, Steve.
Hey everyone, this is Yesshift. I'm Steven Schinder. That's my dad, Dan Schinder, and we're joined by Gordon Giltrap himself. We're going to be talking about his EP Starfield, which was released earlier this year, and talking about music. But yeah, thanks for joining us, Gordon. How's it going on your end?
No, it's good. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's a real honor.
Awesome.
Right.
Thank you.
So this EP came out, I think, at the end of February, if I remember correctly. And I'll read off the track list real quick. We've got the title track Starfield with vocals, The Dodo's Dream, 12 Towers at Dawn, The Fox at Dawn, Small Pockets of Joy. And we also got the instrumental version of the title track Starfield. And I'll show the cover image in a moment as I share the tabs and such. But tell us about the whole process of putting this EP together. What was that journey like?
Well, it kind of grew organically, like most of the things I do, really. The tracks I've had around for some time. But the whole thing about the EP was really to let people hear Starfield vocal and the wonderful voice of Susie Wall. And also it's a sharing thing. The like, for example, the track, The Dodo's Dream. I have a friend in England called Paul White, who's an incredible sound engineer. He's very well known in this country. And he's great. He's a great blues guitar player, but he's also a master of sounds and soundscapes. And I said to him, look, if I just put down the basic acoustic version of the acoustic riff of The Dodo's Dream, why don't you just do the rest? Do your thing on it. And he did, and it just sounds lovely, and I'm pleased with that. Again, it's a sharing thing. 12 Towers at Dawn was originally started life as a solo guitar piece, and then I gifted that track to a friend of mine in Italy, and he wanted to put it on his album. And you know, his name. I should know. It's funny when you're put on the spot, you can't remember him. Alessandro Covaglia. Yeah, he's a very well-known prog rock musician in Italy, and he did his thing on it, and I just love what he did to it. Again, it's a sharing thing, really. Small Pockets of Joy is a relatively new piece of mine, inspired by one of my biggest influences on the guitar, Pete Townsend. Is influenced by the chord progression of Substitute. But if you actually analyze it, it's similar kind of chord changes, similar changes, but of course it's this acoustic piece. So that's how that piece came about.
Nice. It's a beautiful album cover, and the music on this is beautiful, folks. And you know, one of the things that struck me, Gordon, by the third track, I started thinking so much of this music, and by the time I got done listening to the full album, so much of this music, if not all of it, would be great for underscore music and whatnot, for movie scoring. Have you been approached, or do you plan on submitting any of that music for such work? I think it has such a beautiful fit for those types of applications.
Well, certainly Starfield vocal was used for a small B movie that some friends of mine have put together.
Oh, nice.
Oh, wow.
I don't think it's going to make it. I don't think it's going to be as big as Harry Potter, let's put it that way, but usually for that. Yeah, I've written music over many years, but not many people have picked up on it. Maybe I should have a more active publisher. I don't know, but everybody says, oh, this is cinematic. I mean, Brian May said this to me years ago. He says, your music is so cinematic. He said, that's a quick name drop for you. Brian May, you've heard of Brian May? I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, we may have heard of him. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you see, the thing is, since 1976 onwards, I've been trying to paint pictures in music, really. So when you analyze the themes of these albums, the things that have inspired me, they've been mainly art paintings. With Visionary, it was William Blake, paintings and poems. And the album that came after Fear of the Dark was The Peacock Party. That was inspired by a book of the same name. And then I did an album called The Last of England, which is inspired by the work of the Pre-Raphaelites. I find visual images inspiring, you know.
Yeah.
Wow.
I think maybe it can work the other way around, you know, that,
Absolutely.
an artist could hear my music and paint a picture. So it's like kind of a multimedia thing, really.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of the tracks, 12 Hours at Dawn, that's inspired by a Rodney Matthews painting, right?
It is, yeah. Well, it's a friend of mine, a guy called Paul Ward, who I produced a couple of albums with. He's a huge fan of Rodney Matthews, and he had that painting on his wall. I said, "What is that? It's so good." And I'd just written this piece, and I said, let's call it 12 Towers at Dawn." And that's how the title came about, you know, if you think too much about it. But yeah, I think it fits the music, don't you guys?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I love how it worked the other way around like that, you know, that being your inspiration. And as you mentioned, music definitely could influence imagery, as we found from this beautiful video that goes with the title track. And Susie's vocals are just incredible on that. And then I didn't read the track list ahead of time. I found it such a neat surprise to have the instrumental version of the title track. That's quite unique. What inspired having both versions on there?
Well, because it started life as an instrumental piece. And it's a long story, but I'm here to tell it.
Sure.
And the story is this: that my dear wife Hillary, passed away in December 2022.
Right.
And to me, it was real, but people say it's a waking dream. But my wife, I woke up and she stood at the end of the bed and she just looked at me and was smiling and she looked beautiful. And it was such a comfort to me within my grief. And I was chatting with a friend of mine, a lady called Rona Dixon, about this experience. And her favorite track of mine, which was from an album called Scattered Chapters, which hasn't really probably been released, is Starfield. And she writes songs and she writes lyrics. And she felt moved to just write a song to go with it. And she said it to me. I was just on WhatsApp to say, look, this is just for me and you, a present to you, all right? I thought it was so good. I thought with the right vocalist, this could work. And Susie Wall came in, and the rest is history. That's how that piece came about.
That's nice. Wow. And she sounds
about.
beautiful on it. It's just
She
moving.
She did it in 2 takes. She's a remarkable.
Oh wow.
Yeah, 2 takes. Recorded in the dining room of my old house. She just came along. We set up a microphone, and she just did it.
Wow.
Wonderful.
Magic.
Even now, I listen to it. I know a lot of people. They listen to it and they know what the history is, and they find it very emotional and quite moving. I likened it, dare I say it, to the same kind of vibe as a Bridge Over Troubled Water.
Oh wow. Yeah.
It's got the same vibe, you know. It's
Yeah.
that ethereal, otherworldly.
Yeah.
Words of comfort, you know, that life doesn't end here.
Right.
It goes beyond, it carries on in our hearts, in our minds, or if you believe in the metaphysical side of things, which I do, which has given me a lot of comfort, that's helped me through. You know, I think it could be. I think people could be. I think it could give them comfort just listening to it. To me, it's just extraordinary.
That's great.
Yeah, just like how, you know, music like this can be timeless. It's also fascinating how the room in which it's recorded, like people might not even think about it. Like you mentioned where it was recorded, but when listening to it and keeping in mind, you know, the material and even the cover image, it doesn't feel tied down to a place. Like it's timeless and also, I don't know what the right word is, placeless or not tied down to a specific place. Like it could be, you know, in some ethereal place, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's exactly the word I had in my head, ethereal. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense to me, guys, because how many of our favorite pieces of music that we've listened to, we've been moved by it, but we can't imagine a human being creating that or even where they would do it. It's almost like it kind of grew organically. It just exists, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, an example of that. The Righteous Brothers. You've lost that loving feeling.
Yeah.
You know the Phil Spector thing. All that you can't imagine that being done. You just hear it, and it's an experience. It's just an incredible oral experience. But then you see the documentaries and the early documentaries. There's Phil Spector in the studio, and he's got three pianos and all these musicians. It's like the music of Brian Wilson, isn't it?
Right. Right.
Listen to it, and it just comes from somewhere else. So you think, how did that happen? And also, Steve, what you were saying about the room in which it's recorded, and all the music. I mean, we're talking about, let's say, just talk about the music of Yes, for example, which is called the Yesshift. When you listen to a great piece of music or a great recording, what you're listening to is something that's captured in that moment, and you cannot replicate it. It's not possible. So all these stars need to align. The studio is going to be a good studio. You've got to have good musicians. You've got to have a good sound engineer, and the vibe has got to be right. And when you capture that moment, you can capture it on record. Then that's magic, and that magic then continues every time you put the needle on the vinyl, whether you put a CD in or however you hear it. That magic is there. And I remember there was a great interview with Dylan a few years back, one of the classic interviews with Dylan. And the guy said, about the early songs that he wrote. And he said, I asked Dylan, he said, could you do that stuff now? He said, no way. It's not possible. I couldn't write stuff like that now. Because the energy was different. He was different. The whole vibe was different. And so you're capturing a moment in time. And I feel that when I write stuff that I think is good, I think, well, a lot of the time, and I've actually related this to a very dear friend of mine who I'm having lunch with in a couple of weeks' time, is Pete Townsend, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, I write this stuff, I feel as though someone else has written it, it's come from somewhere else, but that's just me. And he said, well, look, let me just turn that on its head, Gordon. He said, it's your fingers, it's your muscle memory, and you're good at your job. So, it kind of brings it down to basics. I go, yeah, okay, Pete, yeah, you're probably right. When I've been doing it for 60 years, so I should be good at what I do. I should be fairly skilled at what I do. But at the same time, I write this stuff, and I'm sure Pete feels the same. When you listen to one of his great songs, The Sea Refuses No River, for example, you think, at what point did he write that verse? Can he remember writing that?
Right.
And at the end, you think, wow, I can't remember writing that. Or what point did I write that piece of music? What inspired it? Maybe the first thing in the morning, maybe late at night. But it's magical. That's a wonderful thing about music, and about playing a guitar, for example, because it's so portable. It doesn't exist until you pick it up, you start playing in it. And if the gods are with you, you play it, and it becomes magic.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a few years ago, we got that Beatles docu-series Get Back, where they showed like the making of the album. It was the whole thing was a few hours long of a watch, and it was so fascinating. Like, you'd get this scene where they're sitting around, they're talking about stuff, and then all of a sudden Paul just pulls out a little bit of Get Back, like almost out of thin air, and it's like, whoa, like that's how it started, isn't it? It's just thinking about the evolution and whatnot.
Yeah, I've just finished an album that should be out in September with a dear friend of mine called Nicholas Hooper. You won't know of him, but you'll know of his work because he's a famous film composer, and he wrote the music for 2 Harry Potter films. Right?
Okay.
Oh, wow.
So he's big time. He's a dear friend, a great guitar player, and we just finished a duo album. I was working on lots of stuff, and I played him a riff I'd had around for absolutely ages, for years, since about 2015. He's looking for material to come up with. So I've just played this riff. And he starts playing. Next thing you know, he's created an African influenced piece of music. We call it the Watermill. And,
Wow.
and it's just great. And I said, how'd you do that? He said, I don't know. I just jammed along with you. And that's how music happens. It's of the moment, and you have to capture it while it's going past. You just grab it quickly,
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
we're go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I was just gonna say, like, all this talk about, we almost can't think of it as being recorded in a humanly room because of how incredible the music is. I think that maybe that's why, I think this is sort of a hypothesis I'm just now coming up with, is when people go to concerts, I think maybe subconsciously they are a reason that they get surprised or blown away is because, well, the music that I imagined, that I couldn't imagine it being in a place, you know, it's here, it's on this stage, it's in this arena or venue or whatever, and that adds another dimension to the whole thing.
Well, it does. I think the magic of that is if you like worshipped at the throne of some of these great artists, and then you go to a concert and you think, my God, this man or this band is in the same space as me right now.
Yeah.
Same space.
In my 60s, I still do that. Ever since I was a kid,
Yeah.
and I still do that. Totally. That's funny.
You can't believe it. You think, wow, you know, wow, we're in the same space. Yeah.
Drove through town, saw the same stuff I see every day. You know, you get all that in your head, and it's interesting. And to Steve's point, I was thinking about, you know, what you were saying about the energy of the room, and people don't know where that was done and all that. 30, 40, 50 years ago, we of course had no idea, unless you were there, what the environment was like, where things were recorded. So one of my favorite examples is when you listen to the album Close to the Edge, you know, it's the theater of the mind creates this whole scene, this whole vibe, this whole visual adventure. And then years and years and years later, we get books and photos online of them recording it in a studio with their gear scattered everywhere, fluorescent lighting. It's like, I thought it'd be like dark and candles and lava lamps, and it'd be sparkly pixie dust everywhere. And it was not like that at all.
It's not. Are you familiar with the fact that I've just had an album re-release with Rick Wakeman called From Brush and Stone?
Yeah, in fact, we were going to talk about that. Yeah. So go ahead.
Of course, I mean, Rick was on that album. He was on the Close to the Edge album, wasn't he?
Right.
Yeah.
You know, and so he was part of that amazing piece of creativity, you know.
Yeah,
And
he played harmonica on that album, I think.
Say that again, sorry.
But you know, we're a few days shy of the 15th. Like, where does time go? Steve mentioned February, and I can't believe how far we are into the year. But talk about 15th anniversary of the album you did with Rick Wakeman, From Brush and Stone. And how did that collaboration come about? And I can't believe it's been 15 years. Can you?
No, I can't. I thought it was a bit less than that, but it doesn't surprise me because the last 10, 12 years have gone so quickly. Now, don't we all measure our life by certain events, certain crossroads in our life?
Yeah.
That date will stay in the mind forever, you know, good things and bad things, you know. You go, oh, that was pre when I did this, or post when I did that. The way it came about was, you know, I'd known Rick for a long time, and we always thought we should do an album together. And the way it came about was he sent me his tracks, and I just recorded my parts in a very basic studio in my old house. And I was lucky. I've said this many times. I was lucky. I spent 5 months on my parts.
Wow.
Right? It didn't take that long, but I had the luxury of time, because I tell you for why. I thought, this is the great Rick Wakeman. I'm standing in the footsteps of all the great guys he's worked with.
Yeah.
How? So I've got to step up to the mark. I've got to be equal to those guys, but as Gordon Giltrap. And that was the luxury. And I played that album now, and I could not have done a better job. For me, I created perfection within the canon of Gordon Giltrap. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was going to ask in regard to that, Gordon, how much was the timing just right for the vibe of your life then to be able to conjure all that up and deliver what you did? Did that have a lot to do with it, or anything to do with it?
Massively so. Because, and I've said this, I have a new partner now. I say new partner, she's a dear friend of mine called Susan Lilly, and I've known her for 40 years, but so we're old friends. But we then together, and a thing called love emerged, which is wonderful.
Nice.
Miraculous and very rare at this time of our lives. But in order for me as an artist, the environment's got to be right to create. It has to be right. If it's not right, then I can't do it. A lot of people write, they say, "Oh, I can only write stuff when I'm depressed." I can't function if I'm depressed. If I'm upset, I cannot function. I cannot pick up guitar. I can't do anything except be depressed. But I had the privilege of living with my wife Hillary for 36 years, and that woman was behind me like ironclad. And so she allowed me to be me. She allowed me to be creative anytime I wanted. And my little room, it wasn't a studio. People say, "Oh, you've got a studio at home." I said, "No, I've got a 24-track hard disk recorder and a guitar and a microphone, right? And these fingers. And that's all I've got."
Yeah.
And you know, if the environment's right, for me, I can do it. So my best work has been created within that environment with the support of a partner, with a lot of love, a lot of support. And to me, that's the only way it works, you know. And I do that. I do have that with Susan. I'm now re-emerging, if you like, from grief back to being me again. I'm doing gigs again. I'm reconnecting with old friends, which I felt I couldn't do for a while. That's the whole process of grief. But I'm very lucky because people say to me, "Oh," I know this is a very personal thing, but I want to share it with you because it's important. They say, "Oh, you're looking so well. You've done so well." I say, "Yes, because I was surrounded by a lot of love, a lot of friends, a lot of family. And because of who I am and a lot of the people know me, I had that support, which helped me through it a lot quicker, you know?"
Yeah.
And without that, I don't know how people. I was a friend of mine called Steve Pilkins, who wrote my biography, just lost his wife. And his life was just basically being a carer for his wife. I don't think he had that many people come to visit. And he is struggling. He's struggling with his grief big time. But I was fortunate, very, very fortunate that helped me through it. So the environment to be creative for me has got to be right. I mean, I don't need green fields and all that. It all comes from in there. But the room where you're in, and to know that you're able to go in there, shut the door, and do your thing and record, or whatever. I moved on from that now. I don't record at home. I like to record with other. I have an engineer. I've done all that. I've worked on my own for so many years, being my own producer, and to make sure that everything was right. So you're wearing two hats. Is this take good? Does it sound good? Is the playing good? Has it got the right emotion? It's all very well playing the notes, but it hasn't got the emotion. Forget it. It just becomes technical. So all those things come into play. And of course, as you get older, it's very hard to actually do all that. And I just want to share it with somebody else. So I've got a friend who's got a studio. I've got friends who've got studios. Of course, these days you can do a whole album on a laptop anyway.
Right.
I would just sooner play and let the guy press the button and go, "Was that take okay? Let's drop in for that," you know?
Yeah. Great
Right.
story. Thanks for sharing the process.
Yeah, that's the way I work. That's the way I want to work. You know?
Yeah. And a few years later, about 2013, you worked with Rick's son, Oliver Wakeman, whom we've talked to a few times on the show, and put out Ravens and Lullabies, and even performed acoustic set together on stage. What was that experience like? How that all came together, and how did you compare that experience of working with Rick and working with Oliver? Like, how different are those experiences?
Oh, it's such a great question. I've got so many answers for you. I got in touch with Oliver because I got to a point I think I want to make another album, but I don't want to make another album like the other one. One could keep making well-recorded, pretty pieces of music because that's what I do. That's my gift. I'm good at that. I'm good at writing tunes. That's my gift. But I thought I need to start moving forward, and I'd done a concert with Oliver. We haven't played together, but I was on a concert with Oliver, a Christmas concert with his dad and his brother Adam. And I knew he was a very fine pianist. I knew he was a good musician because he's Rick's son and he's a genius, right? So I rang up. I said, "I'm doing this album. Would you fancy playing on a track?" He said, "Oh, Gordon, I'd love to." I said, "That's great. We'll get together." I put the phone down. I thought, this is crazy. So I rang him and said, "Why don't we do an album together?" He said, "Okay." Now, I can tell you what it was like. It was hard work. It nearly broke me. And I'll tell you for why. I was in my 50s then, I think mid-50s. And Oliver was just young. He'd just come out of Yes. He'd had an awful experience. which has been well documented, treated brutally, right? And he needed to let people know, particularly the Yes fans and the Yes camp, that Oliver Wakeman was not a spent force. So therefore, there was a lot of angst in him and a lot for him to prove. So really, I just went along with his energy. Whatever you want to do, Oliver, I'll do it. I didn't know he was a great songwriter. I didn't know he was a great engineer. He knew about sound, sound tools and all that. Is that the right word? Pro Tools. Pro Tools. I didn't know any of that. I didn't know he did all that. I didn't know that. I thought it was going to be an instrumental album. They said, well, we got this song. I thought, okay, great. And he was just phenomenal. But my God, it worked me hard. It was sometimes I was almost brought to tears because I couldn't keep up with his energy. I just couldn't keep up. Let's do this. Let's try this. I think I'm just an old guy, I'm trying to keep up. but it's remarkable how quickly the music was written, how quickly it was recorded. Oliver was in the producer's seat. I went over one day to overdub some electric guitar on the track. I said, well, I haven't got anything worked out. He said, look, Gordon, he said, plug in and I'll play the track. I'm just going to go and make a cup of coffee. I'll come back later. Just rock out on the track. I said, Oliver, I don't rock out. I don't this stuff out, Anyway, so he went out and I just doodled over, did a few runs, and he cobbled together the most incredible guitar solo that I probably couldn't play, but it sounded fantastic.
That's great. Gordon, Oliver and like Adam as well have, of course, inherited a great sense of humor from their father. Did Oliver have ways of lightening that workhorse, ethic in the studio? Did he also offer balance in his own way with his wonderful personality?
Yeah, he did. He liked a lot of stuff on YouTube, a lot of the humor on YouTube, and he's always shown this on YouTube. And there's one clip in particular that we fell about laughing. Here in the UK is a great singer-songwriter, a legend called Ralph McTell. Have you heard of Ralph McTell?
I'm not familiar now.
Okay, well, Ralph me neither. He wrote a classic song called "The Streets of London." Sinatra even recorded it, and it's a great song. But of course, every time he does a concert, he has to play it. Like every time I do a gig, I have to do a Heart song, which is cool for me because I love it. I love playing it. It's still a challenge. I love it. I really, truly love it. And I'm going to tell you about the recording of that in a minute. And but of course, they did a skit of Ralph McTell in a club, and he played "The Streets of London," and everybody clapped. And he said, "And now I'd like to do a new piece." He starts singing, and everybody's going, "What's he doing? What's he doing? We want Streets of London." And so they're shouting out, "Streets of London!" And he's trying to play this new song. In the end, he gave in and started playing "The Streets of London." And they all started applauding. But it's so funny to watch, that it's all, not let him move on. All they were here for was "The Streets of London." Just play it on loop, and they'll be happy.
That's funny.
Oliver used to love showing me that clip, and it was hilarious.
That's
so
funny.
Oliver does have an incredible sense of humour. And the thing I love about Oliver, as you know, you've spoken with him, he does not hang on his father's coattails. He's his own man.
Right.
Oh yeah, indeed.
He looks like his dad. He's a better looking version of his dad. He's incredibly handsome, but he's his dad. He's got his dad's. He's I can't help it. It's the way I play.
Yeah.
And he's inherited that, and then so is Adam. But he's his own man, and he's a dear friend. I wish I could see him more often. But he has his own. He doesn't have issues, but he's got a special needs daughter, which is very tragic for him and the family. So his life is taken up with looking after Lottie, really. But in between that, he still manages to do his stuff. He's a genius. He's a phenomenon. I love him, and I'm very proud of that album. I'm very proud of it. And
it's wonderful. Yeah.
Did I read that? But my God, he was so speedy. He just rang. I said, "Look, we want this a chord progression. Can you do it now? Okay, fine. Send it through. Right, done that. Next, can you do this?" But the end result is, and it was good for him. So in some ways, it was cathartic for him to do that album.
Yeah.
To prove to the world, Oliver Wakeman, they shouldn't have got rid of him. It's the whole story behind that. I mean, I don't want to be sued by anybody, but it was pretty brutal.
Yeah.
They really destroyed him, because he built his life up around around the tours.
Yeah.
You know, his family. A wife and 2 children. Well, only one at that time, Arthur. And so, you know, so he's got the house in place and the mortgage and outgoings. Next thing you know, that's just been ripped away from you. You think, well, how am I going to make a living? What am I going to do now?
Yeah.
You know?
He came out of it wonderfully, though. You know, I
Yeah.
wonder if part of the way he works that you've described, Gordon, and this is complete hypothesis on my side. I'll ask him next time we have him on the show. But I wonder if, you know, going from one thing to the next and being so diligent, leapfrogging ahead, you know, to get things done. I wonder if that's kind of baked in to his behavior because of his lifestyle at home. There is a lot to look after, and he knows he only has X amount to go out to his shed and work on stuff.
Absolutely.
So he maximizes that time by doing that, perhaps.
Absolutely, I think so. He has to focus on that. And I've got this time, so I've got to get it done. I've got a session to do for somebody. I have to do it when the kids have gone to bed. You know?
Right,
so
exactly.
The early hours doing that, and then he's holding down a full-time job. Yeah, he's an extraordinary man. I wish I could see more of him. Whether I could work with him again, he'd probably kill me, put me to an early grave or a 70-year-old grave, 77-year-old grave. But yeah, I think you're right. That's very perceptive of you, actually, Dan.
Thanks. And you were going to tell us about the recording of another one of your albums when you were talking about.
Oh yeah, Heart Song was just so amazing the way that all came together, because Heart Song started out many years prior to that as a song I'd written in one of my dreadful vocal albums that we won't talk about, before I really found the real Gordon Giltrap, where I found my voice and said to myself, stop singing and just play the guitar. You know, what did I clap it up? Say, shut up and play guitar. There was a song I wrote called Starting All Over, which is the same descending chord sequence. And I was messing around with that. And I just put the capo on the second fret of the guitar and I started doing the strumming. I thought, yeah, that sounds good. That's quite uplifting. And then I worked on it. And then I took it to the guys in the studio. And then we got the great and mighty Simon Phillips to play on it. And he created that drum fill. But I didn't realize, I know you think this sounds crazy, I didn't realize how melodic that piece was until they started putting the top line on it. Because all I thought in terms was a very fast, exciting strum pattern. But of course, they extracted the chord, so you got the da 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 da. I thought that is so good.
That's interesting. You were more rhythm focused in your perception of it till you heard it.
I wrote it rhythm focused, and also the very filigree, very fast stuff that's very virtuosic. Even I say so myself. Yeah. And then we put the track down. Got Simon put his great drums down, and then we got John G. Perry on bass, and we've got all. And every time we added something to it, we go, "That's great. Why don't we add hand claps?" Okay, so there we were standing around the microphone going, "Yeah, that sounds good. Why don't we try that on it?" And every time we added something, it started to get better and better, and it was joyful. But I had no idea that a record company would put it out as a single. But it's pretty obvious. It's the most accessible and obvious track to get airplay. And all these years on, it's now become a classic, you know. Yeah. And when I go on stage to play it now, I say to the audience, tongue in cheek, I said, when I wrote this in 1977, I had no idea that all these years on, I'd be still playing it and trying to play it with the same energy I had way back then, you know. So I said, so it's going to be interesting to see an old chap on stage to try and do this. I said, the thing about Heart Song is it's got its own inbuilt forward movement energy. It's like an express train, and you on it and you have to hang on because it's taking you somewhere, and the rhythm takes you somewhere. And you've got to keep up with it, you know.
Yeah.
I start off very gently. When it starts going, I start moving with it, and it becomes quite spectacular because the end of it, they go, the old boy can still do it. Oh, well done. You know?
That's wonderful. What's next for you? How does your process work? Like, do you have just oodles and oodles of music that you put out an album's worth at a time and you know what you're going to do next? Or after you put something out, do you let it breathe and take your time and then start on the next project? What's that process like, and where are you now with that?
Well, where I am now is I'm still writing tunes. I got notebooks full of sketches for ideas, and I'm now working with a friend of mine called Mark Guyatt, who basically he used to come to me for guitar lessons. He's a great guitar. He can play 23 of my pieces brilliantly. So he's a fine guitar player. I didn't know he was a good piano player, and he wanted to have a crack at doing some arrangements. And now he's got all this stuff, and I'm now working with him on doing orchestral arrangements of some of my tunes, and particularly some of the older ones. Pieces like Lauren that I wrote, and a piece called The Little Sea, which is a really old piece I wrote in '81. And he's put strings on that, and he's taken it to another level. It's a little bit like 12 Towers of Dawn when I gave it to Anastasia. You know, it's been kind of reimagined. Is that the right word? So we're kind of looking at that. Of course, the album with my friend Nicholas Hooper, which the album's called Out of the Silent Sky. That's coming out in September. So that's happening. I'm touring in October with the great John Etheridge. You know John Etheridge?
Yeah. And that's October, you said?
The whole of October we're touring the UK. Yeah.
Nice.
So we're putting together an album to go with basically a material that we did live, and so we're revisiting that, and we've cobbled together about 8 tracks, and with 3 of them we sent yesterday to John, so he's going to overdub his guitar. So we're going to have a little mini CD there, and it's going to be good. Right. And people are going to want to go away and with a memory of the night, because people still buy CDs, you know. I love them. It's still that tactile thing, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm working on that. Loads of other little bits and pieces I can tell you about. I know Rob Ayling, who put out this label, put out Starfield. We're putting together all my archive stuff in box sets for me. And so that's exciting. And there's so much material. You know, 60 years, man.
Yeah, that's a long time.
When I say that, I can't believe it. I think, oh my God. See, the thing is, getting back to the work I did in all those prog albums was the great Simon Phillips on drums.
Yeah.
What's the point of this question? I've now lost the thread of what I was going to say about those albums. Yes, when I did the Visionary album, my producer said, "Who would you like to play drums?" I said, "I want Bill Bruford. I love his work. I want Bill Bruford." They said, "Well, you can't. He's touring America." So they said, "No, we found this young guy. He's only 18, and he's pretty damn good." That was Simon Phillips.
Oh, so this was way back then. Was he like at the time playing with Camel, or shortly after Camel, like around then?
Where? No, I don't. I'm not aware of that. But Simon was doing basically playing in the pit in theatres, doing any sessions he could get.
Yeah.
Right? But he's a genius, and we got this guy. He's really good. And if you look at Simon Phillips' website, he still gives me a name check, which I'm so touched by. Out of all the people he's worked with, Jeff Beck, The Who, Toto, Gordon.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you, Simon. How kind, you know. But anyway, the point is, I wanted Bill Bruford, but we got Simon instead. And I met Bill Bruford several years ago, and I said, "You know, I wanted you on one of my albums, Bill." I said, "But you couldn't make it." I said, "But we got Simon Phillips." He said, "Yes, damn him."
I can just hear Bill.
So everybody knows this guy is like unbelievable.
Yeah.
Could do anything.
Awesome.
Yeah. I want to read a few comments that have come in. So Charles Nolan says, "Hello, Steve, Dan. How are you guys doing today? I arrived here 3:30 Eastern time. Gordon has had a long career. I certainly has, as we've been talking about here." Mark Lang says, "Lovely to hear Gordon. I love the album with Rick, and even more the Ravens album with Oliver. Nice. The title track is one of my favorites. Looking forward to your album with Milton Keen, Adam Wakeman." You know, referring to Jazz Sabbath there. Is there anything in the works with Adam Wakeman, or is that like a little joke?
Me working with Adam, you mean?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I got Oliver.
Yeah. Okay.
Maybe he thinks that's the next thing in the progression of time.
Yeah, that's the
Of course,
next thing you
would
should
have been
do.
on stage with Sabbath a couple of nights ago, wouldn't he?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've yet to see that. Apparently, poor old Ozzy was in a wheelchair.
yeah,
The
yeah.
world
We
of-
watched that. It was great.
I'll
Yeah,
tell you a story. This is the thing that not many people know. Not many people know this. But when I lived in a place called Solihull, I lived just up the road from Tony Iommi. And
Oh,
Tony and
wow.
Iommi became good friends. And we were going to do an acoustic album together. Seriously.
oh, wow, really?
Yeah. And his manager rang me up one day and he said, Gordon, he said, I think Tony should do an acoustic album. He said, and you're the right person to do it with. I said, okay, I'd love to. So I went round to Tony's house and there was Tony with his left-handed, because he plays
Yeah.
Taylor guitar. But then his manager rang me. He said, Tony doesn't want to do it.
Oh,
I said, why not? He said, something about he was overawed by you or something like that. Because I'm not like that. I said, what? You know,
oh, wow.
I think to be honest, Tony was too much outside of his comfort zone. It's as simple as that. Tony
He's
is
done
great.
some great acoustic pieces in the
Yeah,
early.
I've heard them. He played them to me.
Yeah,
That would have been so good. I would have enjoyed that because he's a nice guy. I was never a fan of Sabbath, and I
Yeah.
wasn't really familiar with what he did. But Tony is probably lovely. He's a real brummy. He's all right, Gordon. All right, mate. You know, talks
Yeah.
like that. And I did an album in 1997 called Troubadour, and I gave him a copy. He turned up at the
Oh,
house.
yeah.
He said, "Oh, Gordon," he said, "I love that album." I said, "What album?" He said that. And of course, it's beautiful guitar and orchestra, but he loves it. And did you know that Tony is a pretty hot jazz guitar player? Did you know that?
I did know that because I think that's one of the reasons Ian Anderson wanted to steal him away for Jethro Tull back then, because they started out as a jazz blues band. So that was very much in
Yeah.
Ian's wheelhouse and his radar. And of course, that never happened.
Tony studied a lot of jazz stuff in the early days, you know, Barney
Yeah.
Kessel and all those guys. And he played me some of it, and he could do it. He could do all
Yeah.
those jazz progressions, you know. And what a remarkable man, though, to overcome that thing of the
Oh,
fingertip.
yeah. The
That takes
accident.
a lot of determination. And
Yeah.
I've seen Tony for years. I'd love to see him again.
Do you think that could happen, Gordon? You guys doing that album?
No,
No.
never, it would never. Because life changes, you know, things
Yeah.
move on. His manager was called Ralph Baker. Ralph rang me and said, Tony, he just felt that I don't think I was, I don't know, maybe I was full of, maybe I did an Oliver Wakeman on him. I had all these ideas and we could do this and that. I'd been overwhelmed with it, but he wasn't comfortable with it. Hence the reason why he's never done an acoustic album.
So about what year would this have been, Gordon?
This would have been around about 1997, 98.
Okay.
Yeah, around about that time.
That's interesting because that's shortly, excuse me, that's right around or shortly before they did their first reunion when Bill Ward came back. I saw that tour at the LA Forum. So it was maybe like shortly before then, which is interesting.
It was an interim period where Tony was trying to keep something together.
Yeah.
It's just him and Geezer Butler, I think. And they were recruiting different drummers. I know Ben Beckman played with Sabbath for a time.
Yeah.
And he had various keyboard players. And then Tony was just trying to keep the thing alive, you know.
Right. Exactly.
You know, but it would obviously, it's not going to be Sabbath without those original guys. It's like the Who, really. You know, two of the guys are dead now. But you know, to me, the Who is Townsend and Daughtry. That's still the Who, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Black Sabbath did go out with a bang, and I think they did it right, and they donated so much money to three great causes. So that was really nice to see.
Oh, yeah, Children's Hospitals, wasn't it? I believe.
Yeah. And Parkinson's research, and over time, Ozzy donated a lot of money that sent a lot of kids, 500 kids were able to go to school, like primary school and stuff like that, that wouldn't have been able to. So him and Sharon have always done things right in that area.
Fantastic. So it's giving back. You're just giving back, aren't you?
Yeah.
You just want to give something back. Yeah. I know in 2015 I became very ill and I had to have surgery a year later. and I met so many fantastic people in the hospital, surgeons, doctors, nurses, and I felt I wanted to give something back. So I had an album called Shining Morn, which I could have reissued, but I basically put other tracks with it, a new cover, which turned out to be a better album. And I donated it to the charity, and they raised about £4,500.
Nice.
Selling the CD, and that was great. You know, you just want to give something back.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I said, thank you, I'm alive. I said to my surgeon, wonderful man, his photographs on the back of the album we did. And I said, Mr. Ford, I said, I owe you my life. You know, you saved my life. He said, no, Mr. Giltrap. He said, I did my job and you got better.
Oh, that's great.
True, it's true. He did his job, but it's just down to the lap of the gods whether you get better or not. I got better. Thank God I'm still here, and I'm, you know, I was not meant to leave the planet. There was work still to be done, and there still is work to be done.
And did you see your career that way? Well, I guess what I'm asking, Gordon, is 40 years ago, 50 years ago, in your first 10 to 20 years of playing for 60 years, did you see yourself at this stage of life still doing what you're doing?
No, because I don't think you hope you're going to still be playing in old age. But I mean, you know, if I can share this with you guys, and it's very personal, a very wonderful thing. I'm still in wonder of it all. I'm still, who is this guy, Gordon Giltrap? It's the guy you're chatting to now. But the Gordon Giltrap I know left school at 15, grew up in the mean streets of southeast London, left school at 15 and worked on building sites for 5 years with nothing, with no qualifications, nothing. And I just taught myself everything. I taught myself to play the guitar when I was 12, and everything's been homemade. I still play the guitar wrong. All you guitar players who are watching, that's all I use. I use a plectrum in that thumb. I use my little finger. That's all I use. That's all I knew when I taught myself, and it stayed the same. But it works for me.
Yeah.
So therefore, you know, I said to a very dear friend of mine a few years back, I said, you know, all the people that inspired me, that changed my life with their music, have become my friends. I said, how did that happen? And she said, well, you're a nice person.
That helps.
I thought I never thought of that. But if you think about it, they all did. And now I am having dinner in a couple of weeks' time with Pete Townsend. We're talking about doing a project next year. He's doing an album. He wants me to play on it.
That's awesome.
How did that happen? In 2019, I got awarded an MBE. I stood in front of our king at Buckingham Palace, and he's handing me this medal. Yeah. Services to music. You can't write this stuff.
Right.
You cannot write it. I'm still in awe of it, and I'm still grateful and humble about it all. You've got to be humble. But at the same time, you have to be proud of what you do, you know? And you have to give thanks to all the people that believed in you, that helped you along the way. If you know, people might meet me and they may like me or may dislike me, I don't know, whatever, and they can probably not relate to me as a person, but no, I will not allow anybody to insult my art, what I've created. Doesn't mean it's all great, because if they insult me and my art, they're insulting the memory of my life, my wife, who supported me for 36 years through thick and thin. They supported, and all the people that put me forward to get an MBE, and all the people, no, the handful of people that turn up at my gigs. I'm not big time. I'm not a stadium artist. I'm happy to get 150 people at a gig, you know. But I'm happy to make a living out of it, doing what I do, and it still gives people pleasure. That's the important thing.
Yeah.
Right. So I double-edged sword. You know, you have to be humble and grateful, but at the same time, be proud of what you've achieved. And I think as you get older, you look back, you go, "That was good work." But one stage, I wouldn't dare to say that. Oh, that's really good, because that would sound arrogant. It's not being arrogant. It's being honest and proud with the gift that God has given you, and you put it to the best, to the best of your ability to good work. You know.
Yeah.
Not to abuse it. That's the thing. Don't abuse it. So many people I know have abused it by alcohol and drugs, and they end up in an early grave. You know, that's an abuse of an art. That's abuse of a gift. I know it's difficult. I've never, in a short time, I was a rock star. Wasn't for very long, You know, I kind of saw that into that life, but I've never been into drugs. I don't drink. I'm not saying I'm a pillar of virtue. I'm not a saint, but the idea of taking a substance that would control my brain and would stop me from playing the guitar to the ability and the speed I'd need to play was anathema to me. I thought, well, no, I don't want that. I don't want anything to get in the way with what I can do. This is all I can do.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to be starting smoking dope and starting to deaden my senses. You know, it's another thing. But that's just me. I sound like I'm preaching, but I'm not really.
No, but it's great advice. And Steve has our last magical question. I can't wait to hear the answer to this.
Right. Well, before I do that, I just want to, before I forget, I mentioned yesterday, I saw a comment on our page from Pamela Firth saying that she saw one of your shows in the 80s and even got a CD signed and that it was a great show. So there you go.
Nice.
And I also want to circle back real quickly about Starfield and just mention that when I was listening to this, it was morning and I was walking through the park. So this was really good, beautiful, like waking up sort of music. There are lots of great artists, but not all of their stuff is, some of it can be loud and not the right thing to listen to in the morning when you're just waking up. But this did the trick at a reasonable pace, and it was just great to wake up to as I was walking through the park listening to it.
I'm very grateful. Can I tell you just a quick story? Do we have time for this?
Sure, certainly.
Yeah.
Well, a quick story about how Starfield came about, and this is how remarkable this thing works. I'm a great lover of, you call them yard sales in the States, right? Over here we call them car boot sales. I went to a car boot sale on a Sunday morning and I picked up a budget Fender Squire Strat for £20, right?
Oh, wow.
20 quid. I brought it home, took it apart like I normally do, cleaned it all up, put it back together again. And at 9:15 on the Sunday night, there's nothing on TV. So I said to my wife, I think I'll go and plug this thing in and see what it sounds like. So I plugged it in. And for some reason, I put it into an open tuning that I'd written for my grandson called Through Braden's Door. It's a very bizarre tuning. Don't ask me why I put an electric guitar into an acoustic guitar tuning. Don't ask me why. And then I thought, I put a bit of delay on this, a preset delay for a piece I wrote called On Canvas Sounds years ago. Put it on. I started playing it, and in 20 minutes, Starfield was virtually finished.
Wow.
In 20 minutes on a guitar that I bought that morning for £20. Right.
What a story.
And then I refined it, and then I gave it to Paul Ward, and then it became the piece that it is today. Now, another thing is, and this is again a personal thing. I don't know whether I would do this now, but when my son died, because I lost my son in 2018, I consulted a medium, right, and a very powerful lady, and she was giving me messages from Jamie from the other side, you see.
Mm-hmm.
And I was chatting to her one day, and she said, "Have you written a new tune?" I said, "Oh yeah, I just have." And of course, anybody can say, "Oh, because that's what I do." She said, "It's a very haunting piece, isn't it?" I said, "Yeah." She said, "It's something to do with the sky." I said, "Yeah, wow. It's Starfield." She said, "Yes." Well, Jamie was in the room when you wrote it. He helped you write that. Now, believe that or not, who knows? None of us know about the hereafter. I can tell you certain things that did happen shortly after he died, certain things that happened in the house that you cannot write, and they actually did happen, and there's no logical reason why they did. So
I get that.
It's the soul, it's the spirit. They hang around a bit, make sure you're okay. I'm sure of that, and that's how Starfield came about. Magical. It wrote itself.
Wow.
Amazing.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that with us.
Oh, a pleasure. No, I don't often share these personal things, but that's what life's all about, isn't it? You can chat to Gordon Giltrap, you can talk about his equipment and how wonderful he is and how other people he's worked with. But what about real life?
Yeah. And that's what Steve's next questions about, actually.
You know, that's what people want. They want to hear. They want to hear about your failures. They want to hear about your suffering. They want to hear how you got over that, how you survived that, how other people how other people can live their dream, if you like. You know, so many young guitar players in the past have said to me, "What advice would you give me? I want to make a living out of music." And time again, I've said the following. I said, "There's a thing in our brains called logic, right? But when you apply it to a musical career, you take that logic out of your brain, you put it into a box, because logic will tell you you're crazy.
Yeah.
It will tell you there's easier ways to make a living. But with me, it's a little still small voice that says, you can't give up. You can't give up. You've got to keep going." Because it was all I had. I had nothing to lose, only everything to gain. I didn't have when I turned professional, I didn't have to give up a university career or education, because I had no education, right? I had everything to gain. So I say that there's a simple thing. It's called desire. If you've got the desire to do something, you will become successful. At what level you want to become success? I never wanted to be famous. I never wanted to be a rock star. Because I was very much into the acoustic guitar, that esoteric thing. You know, there's a small number of people that follow what you do and they love it, and it's art and it's wonderful. And I would frown on commercialism, obviously. So I had no idea that would happen. All I wanted to do was to make an album. So wouldn't it be so cool to make an album, to leave something behind? You know, wouldn't it be so cool to walk down the road and look in your local record shop and there's your album in the window? Oh, what a dream come true. And of course, those dreams did come true.
Yeah.
You don't expect that to happen. So, it's all pretty wonderful, really. And I thank the Lord for it. I really do.
That's awesome.
Exactly. And folks, you can get this CD. Check out the info over at giltrap.co.uk. But before we sign off, last question. Gordon, when you're not working on music, when you get free time, like in between music, what do you like to do outside of music?
Well, what I used to do outside of music was fixing guitars, but I've just moved to a new house now, so I like doing little odd jobs around the house. I mean, I'm pretty good at, not major at DIY, but I can do stuff, because my second job when I left school was working on a building site. I was a plumber's mate, so I learned how to use a saw, a hammer, and a shovel, and all those practical skills stay with me. So if anything needs doing, I'll give it a go. But really, I'm getting to the age now, I'm thinking I could damage these, and I'm too old to be doing heavy stuff and climbing ladders, so I don't do that anymore. But little jobs like that, I like to do that.
That's great.
Also, I need to find some time to do some meditating, because I think that meditation is so good. I've been following a spiritual path for a little while, but that kind of slips off the back burner. We're all our own worst enemies. I need to. So that's me. That's what I'm all about, really. And just negotiating family problems. We've got kids. My partner, she's got 4 kids, and they're all very challenging. And I've only got the one. I've got my daughter. And she's going through a difficult thing in her life. So you try to be supportive for them. Right. That's important. I was with a world famous violinist called Nigel Kennedy a week or so ago. Have you heard of Nigel Kennedy?
I haven't. No.
I don't think so.
He's a major, one of the greatest violinists in the world, really.
Oh, wow.
And I said to him, you know, Nigel, I said, I'll be a much better guitarist if I practice more. He said, well, what's more important than practicing? He practices 2 hours every day playing Bach. He said, what's more important than practicing? I said, yeah, you're right. Then I thought to myself, yeah, I tell you what's more important than practicing. Life is more important than practicing. And people are more important than practicing. So you have to kind of, straddle all that. Get your priorities right,
Yeah, absolutely. Gordon, thanks so much for not only taking time with us for this, but for sharing so much wisdom and so many of your personal experiences as well.
Guys. I'm just a kid from, let's call it 15, from the rough part of town, and I'm just lucky. But I tell you what's lovely for me is to speak to you guys in America And I have no concept that anybody's heard of me in America, or anybody would be interested in Gordon Giltrap.
Oh, wow.
It's always a surprise to me that people in your part of the world have heard of me. It's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. And Steve, tell them where where they can find us. Wow, that was hard to get out.
Yeah, right. They can follow us at Yesshift on Facebook and YouTube. Go to anchor.fm/Yesshift if you just want the audio, and you can write to us at yesshiftpodcast@gmail.com. And again, for Gordon's works, go to giltrap.co.uk and see what you want to get.
I'll tell you what I'm going to do now, guys. I'm going to mention you in my monthly newsletter. I'm going to write it right now and say what a buzz it's been chatting with you. I'm just going to put down Yesshift. They'll find you.
Thank you very much. Hang on the line with us for just a moment after we say goodbye to the audience, Gordon. And folks, thanks so much for joining myself, Dan, Stephen, and Gordon, of course, here on this episode of Yesshift. We'll be back for more soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.